after what you're about ready to hear.
We love you, Kerry!
You feel great!
Yeah. Don't love me so much, okay? So I asked my best friend Joe. We met back in 1978.
It was a very good year.
It was a great year.
How do we meet?
You don't want to know. We met through some friends. Okay, we met through some mutual friends. And we were friendly doing one summer. And really, guys, anyways, I'm going to introduce my best friend, Joe Kelley, who is going to be your MC for the night. So good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
Good. You all look great. Great. Thank you.
So do you.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to give a little bit more detail to how Kerry and I met. So in 1978, I had just returned from a 6-month trek to Europe, and I was doing landscaping up in the Hollywood Hills. And I was taking the bus home one night, and the bus stopped at Hollywood and Vine, and a young man stepped up on the bus, and our eyes locked, and that was the beginning of a great relationship. But it wasn't Kerry. So I went to Tim's house one day after work, and who was there but Kerry Plinton, my good friend Kerry Plinton. And that was the beginning of a great, loving, intimate adventure. And I also want to say we've had our ups and we've had our downs, but you know, our relationship, Kerry, has lasted. It is 36 years. And we are closer now than we ever have been. And I just want to say, you are the best friend I have on the planet, okay? You know, Kerry and I have even talked about ending our senior lives together. You know, as old friends.
As
old friends.
Old friends.
No idea!
Okay, so speaking of old, I want you to know there's a lie in the house here. Okay? So, I have it on good authority that Kerry Plinton was born April 7th, 1949. He is not 60. This man is 65 years old. Looks good for 65. Kerry and I have done a little traveling over the years together, and several years ago, Kerry and I did a road trip up to San Francisco, visiting our friend Richard. Richard, you want to wave it? Okay, good. Richard and his roommate were celebrating the summer solstice, I think. And it was great. We had a great time. But Kerry and I had to leave the next morning to go to work. So Kerry was driving home, and he said, you know, Joe, I'm feeling a little funny here. I said, Kerry, you gonna be okay? He said, yeah, I'm fine. So about half an hour later, Kerry goes, oh, Joe, something's wrong here. Something is wrong. I said, Kerry, pull the car over. So he pulls the car over and he reaches into his pocket, and his asthma medicine that he thought he had taken earlier was still in his pocket. So Kerry had taken something else. We also did some other traveling. We went down to Puerto Vallarta one year. Kerry and his partner at the time, Larry, and I were down in Puerto Vallarta. And we went to this restaurant. It was a great restaurant. It's a famous restaurant. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton filmed part of their film, Night of the Iguana there. So picture this. This restaurant is on cliffs. It's overlooking the ocean. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful restaurant. So we're sitting there, we're having this delicious dinner, superb cocktails, sunset. We were blessed with this beautiful sunset. We had a great evening. So we paid our bill, and we were leaving, right? And we noticed that there was this huge glass table in the lobby. And on this table were Mexican pieces of art, beautiful vases with fresh flowers, and this sculpture, just humongous, brightly painted sculpture, right? So I go over and I sign this guest book that's on this glass table. And then Kerry walks up, and he sets his elbows on the table and proceeds to sign this guest book. Suddenly, there was this explosion.
No.
This explosion. And all we could hear was the 10,000 pieces of glass hitting the marble floor. Just so you know, the whole restaurant went quiet. Okay, so the staff rushed up, they brushed all the glass off of us. We had glass in our shoes, torn pants, it was a mess. But everything turned out okay, right, Kerry?
Until tonight.
Okay, one last thing. Richard, our good friend, came down from San Francisco a few years ago. Yeah, Richard, you're trouble. You're trouble, okay? Okay, so Richard came down from San Francisco to spend time with Kerry. And I came out to hang out with both of them. And then, the morning after, we were just chatting, talking, and someone said, it may have been me, said, it would be really cool to go to San Francisco. I mean, not San Francisco, Las Vegas. So we immediately made reservations for the Venetian, and we drove immediately to Las Vegas. We had a great time. Anyway, we decided after having cocktails or something, that we would do a walking tour of all the major hotels and casinos, right? So we're outside Caesar's Palace, and we notice that there's this huge crowd hanging out. We don't know what's going on. We don't see any activity or anything. So we're hanging out. All of a sudden, this invisible underground fountain just explodes. Explodes. And Kerry screams at the top of his lungs. Okay?
I'm going to amend that.
Wait. Kerry would have you believe that it was all of us screaming, but it was Kerry Plinton. And again, there was a moment of silence as the crowd turned and looked to see who was screaming. Okay, so that's it for me. So I would like to introduce a few other people who have a few things to share with you about my good friend Kerry Plinton. Okay, first of all, I'd like to introduce Barbara Newkirk and Terri Hamman.
Well, just
Here we go.
okay, so just in time. I actually made a few notes. Where's Kerry? Because most of the stories that I talked to him about, he said absolutely not. But I think there might be a few more tonight that will pop out. I'm Barb Newkirk, or Barbara Zerneal Newkirk, because I used my maiden name before when I first met Kerry. And Kerry began his job at Foot Cone and Belding Advertising in 1990, working on the Mazda account. His first assignment was to create a network, as you might remember.
Yes, I do.
And install workstations for everyone in the agency. That's not really that big of a deal, but there was over 300 people at the agency and one Kerry, one position. So needless to say, everyone had his number on speed dial and called him rapidly. But Kerry, as you know, he enjoys people, and he knew, and probably still does know, a majority of everyone that worked at that agency. Not only did he go to their desk to set up their computers, he'd sit down and visit and learn all about them and their family and everything. In 1992 and 93, we had a baby boom at the agency. Between 15 and 20 women were pregnant over that year. Yeah, really. No, it wasn't Terri. No, nothing to do with Terri.
Nieces and nephews, I don't know.
Oh, no. But I was one of the moms, and I had my son during that year of 93, and Kerry became Uncle Kerry to almost everyone. One of my favorite stories of Uncle Kerry was when I returned from part-time to, I went from a few weeks before I went back to full-time, working at the agency. Kerry's office was right off the lobby, so this was just a natural place for me to drop my son off while I attended meetings throughout the office and even went to lunch appointments. Kerry's babysitting services were very much appreciated. Terri, you had some things?
Oh, no.
I did. Terri also.
Barbara?
What?
Isn't there a little bit more you want to tell me?
Not about the diapers. He wanted to share that, but he just was a good babysitter.
Okay.
Well, Barbara said there were about 300 people that needed to get Kerry's services. I was 299. I was a brand new hire in 1991 at FCB, straight off the boat from Iowa. No, there's no boat from Iowa. And Kerry breezed by my office on my first day of work, and I said, "Oh, you're the guy." And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Where's my typewriter?" And he looked at me and he said, "Did no one ask you if you were computer literate?" I'd never heard the term computer literate. I said no. And I'm thinking, I'm fired. I'm fired. I said, I'll work with it. He said, "Your computer will be here in like 3 or 4 days. So 3 or 4 days goes, and then there's this little box sitting on my desk with a manual. There's no Kerry. He was working with the 298 other people. And I said, "Okay, fine, I can learn this, I can do it, I can read the manual." About a week later, Kerry apparently had a lull and came and sat down in my office. And I said, "Kerry, how you doing?" I'm like, I'm fine. I got it all figured out, I'm good. And he says, "Are you left-handed?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Because you got the mouse on the wrong side of the computer." And I said, "Well, if I'd have had an IT guy." He got up and walked out of my office. Needless to say, he took the joke really well, and I'm so glad that we've reconnected in the last couple weeks, and actually last couple months, and happy birthday, Kerry.
All right, so the next person I'd like to introduce, right, she's been introduced already, but it's Kerry's cousin, Katie Plinton Roman. Come on, Katie.
Okay, this altitude is getting to me. I'm Tampa, Florida right now. My voice has changed totally, so it's kind of sexy. But, okay, I'm a Plinton through and through. All right, I just want to start off by saying that I got this email from my cousin, a Plinton, Kerry Plinton to be exact. And he limited me to 3 to 4 minutes. And you know, as you are all here, because he is your friend, that there is no way that I am limited to this to 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, I wrote this whole speech. I threw that totally out. I just want to say, first of all, it's so great to be here. It's so great to see all of you and meet all of you. It's so amazing. The support, the love, the friends. I'm having a great time. Okay, with that being said, let me get to the dirty part. All right. My father was Kerry's father's oldest brother. We spent the best times as children, all the holidays at 516. We never called our grandparents by grandparents. We always talked about going to the house at 516 West Broad Street in Westfield, New Jersey. So Kerry lived in Mass, we lived in Plainfield, and every holiday we spent together as cousins. These are my favorite cousins. For me to be here tonight is extraordinary, and I'm so glad to be a part of it. So I'm going to share a little story about something that happened when we were kids. Every Christmas, we got together at the grandparents' house. It was a huge thing. And this one particular Christmas, I'm thinking I was probably maybe 6 or 7 years old, which meant Kerry was 9 or 10, maybe 11. And he got this gift. And this is one Christmas that Kerry didn't want to come to Westfield, New Jersey, because he just got this gift and he didn't want to leave home. He says, so, he's like, Mom, I don't want to go. And she's like, why don't you want to go? Because this was huge. This was a huge thing for us as friends, as cousins, my best friends. And he's like, well, Santa just brought me this gift, and I don't want to leave it. So Mrs. P, as you probably fondly know her of, and my Aunt Martha, said, well, honey, you can bring it with you. And he did. The first thing that happened was my bully brother, Jimmy O, which some of you know about, broke it. So Kerry, I just want to replace this gift for you. I have to make him open it. Come here. We had the best times as cousins. We had so much fun. Come on, open it.
Please tell me this is Operation.
My brother was a bully. The first thing he did was break that game. My cousin. I always thought he was going to be a doctor. I'm not really sure how. But anyway, we had the best times as cousins. I can't even begin to tell you the memories.
I got so much stuff that Christmas, my sister and I spent hours mastering this.
Mastering operation.
Bring New Jersey, and I went.
What, 10 seconds?
I don't want Jimmy to get a hold of it.
And he did.
In 5 minutes, it was broken.
Oh, it wasn't even 5 minutes. It was probably 20 seconds. And he destroyed it. So Kerry, on behalf of the other Plintons who can't keep it to 3 or 4 minutes, now you can be that doctor I always knew you would be. Thank you guys so much for coming out. It's so great meeting all of you. California rocks.
Okay. All right, so now I'd like to introduce you to Mark Atu.